in October of 2023. 22-year-old Elicia Zinger of Tampa, Florida was arrested for posing as a teenage girl and engaging in sexual relations with multiple minors. She claimed to be 14 years old and homeschooled. Her fatal error was in disclosing her true nature and her activities to a young boy with whom she'd held a months-long relationship. When things between them finally went south, she had met the victim in May of 2023 and the two broke up in September, at which point she told him everything. The victim then alerted police in October and they began investigating. Soon, they had produced more than enough evidence to charge Zinger. The boy revealed that she had physically engaged with him on at least 30 occasions. Zinger and the boy had even had a run-in with the law together before it all blew up. She and the victim were caught shoplifting, and she gave officers on the scene a false birth year to hide the fact that she was a legal adult. Further investigation revealed that she had sent illicit materials to multiple young boys, many of them she had also had physical contact with. The first crop of victims that police learned about ran the gamut from 13 to 15 years old. At this time, Zinger is facing at least 17 felony charges related to her actions. She will be charged for each victim and possibly for each act, depending on what evidence turns up. When put before a judge, she pleaded not guilty. She waived her right to an arraignment and bonded out of jail. More victims have come forward since, with at least one being as young as 12 years old. This resulted in Zinger being arrested again. The investigation wears on as authorities encourage victims to speak out. Number 8. Fake cop, real terror. On January the 21st of 2021, two women in Sarasota, Florida, were arrested for impersonating police officers and staging fake traffic stops, which they live-streamed online. 28-year-old Jamaica McDowell and 39-year-old Rishona Poole outfitted a vehicle with a flashing blue light bar and used it to pull over unsuspecting citizens. Cops were eventually alerted by a call from a concerned citizen who thought that some officers performing a traffic stop were in distress. When officers arrived on the scene, they did not in fact find one of their fellow law enforcement professionals having a hard time. Instead, they found a vehicle with an illegal blue light bar having pulled over a random vehicle. In a video of the incident that the duo of fake cops themselves posted on Facebook Live, one of them can be heard demeaning and threatening the people in the car they had just pulled over. McDowell and Poole were arrested for, among other things, impersonating an officer. Since the victims were being illegally detained, the two were also charged with unlawful imprisonment. Figuring that this might not have been the only time the two had pulled this stunt, local police publicized the two fake cops' mugshots and asked any of their past victims if there were any to come forward, to which some people did indeed come forward, leading to more charges. McDowell had an unrelated warrant out at the time of the arrest, meaning she had to face that on top of the charges from this incident. While impersonating an officer is a misdemeanor, Florida law has provisions that can bump that up to a third-degree felony depending on the circumstances. Unlawful imprisonment, meanwhile, is a bit more serious of a charge. Number 7. Fake cop hand delivers himself to real cops. In August of 2019, 25-year-old Valerie Portlock out of New York decided to impersonate a cop and pull somebody over on the road. His choice of targets couldn't possibly have been worse. He tried the trick on a van full of actual police detectives. To make matters worse, the occupants of the van had been actively keeping an eye out for this specific man. When local police started getting reports of a man acting erratically and pretending to be with law enforcement, when he figured out just how big of a mistake he had made, Portlock tried to flee the scene in his illegally modified vehicle. He didn't get too far before local highway patrol caught up with him, and he was arrested on charges of reckless endangerment and fleeing police, along with the original charge of criminal impersonation. He was released on his own recognizance later on, with the expectation that he would return to court near the end of that month. It's unclear what happened to the case from there. Number 6. Seems justice isn't for all. On October the 12th of 2023, Kenyan authorities arrested an unlicensed lawyer with no degree, but who had won all 26 of his court cases before authorities figured him out. Brian Mwenda, a resident of Kenya, opted not to take the usual path into the courtroom because he could not afford tuition. He has publicly and proudly proclaimed that he painstakingly taught himself the working of the law so that he could practice it without having to go through law school. He even went as far as professing to have hacked a website and inserting his own photo to make it seem more like he had all the traditional credentials. Mwenda's unprecedented legal win streak has fired the public up on his behalf. Many commentators have pointed out that his wins were against lawyers who had degrees and were licensed and qualified. Mwenda himself, meanwhile, took to social media to declare that he did not regret his actions and helped to defend innocent Kenyans who would otherwise have not had the means to secure the legal counsel they needed. As of the latest updates on the case, Mwenda was initially released while awaiting his trial, but he then missed the court date and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Number 5. Money can't buy smarts. In March of 2024, 27-year-old Miriam Santana of Sao Paulo, Brazil, was arrested after treating nearly 30 patients at a medical facility with no license. She had reportedly bought a medical degree from a website for the rough equivalent of $8, then signed up with a medical staffing agency. During her first day on the job at a local medical center, other staff noticed that she was using another doctor's identification and alerted authorities. Santana first claimed that she had gotten her degree in 2022. The problem with that is the school she named, when contacted by authorities, said they hadn't even begun offering a medical program until 2023. She eventually confessed and was charged with illegal practice of medicine, use of false documents, and false identity. At this time, legal proceedings in the case are ongoing. Number 4. Fraud happens in Vegas. On January the 16th of 2024, police in Las Vegas, Nevada arrested 35-year-old Senior Poulsen for pretending to be a lawyer and forging signatures and documents, among other acts of fraud. She spread a wide net, committing fraud while working for multiple law firms, forging the signatures of local judges and even embezzling thousands of dollars from a previous employer. At one point, Poulsen was a registered notary public. She was suspended in 2012 due to consumer complaints, and in 2016 her still suspended certification lapsed completely. Despite this, she continued to prepare and submit documents. She initially did this by using a stolen identification number before eventually switching to using one that was completely fabricated. As a fake attorney, she allegedly forged numerous signatures in at least 4 different cases, at one point stringing a client in a divorce along and causing them to believe they were legally divorced when they weren't. She also defrauded a co-worker once, convincing the woman to lend her over $15,000, and forging communications from Chase Bank when it came time to pay back. Poulsen was saddled with 17 felony charges. Since she was never a practicing attorney and was not a certified notary public after 2012, police are asking those who worked with her or paid her to come forward. At this time, the case is ongoing. Number 3. A man of many fake hats. In January of 2020, sheriff's deputies in Jefferson County, Colorado, arrested 50-year-old Michael Nelson for impersonating an officer after he had pulled a woman over and showed her a federal Interpol badge that did not belong to him. He attempted to ask for her ID, and she expressed skepticism over his claim of being a federal agent. He reacted to this sentiment by walking away to call for backup, and the woman took the opportunity to drive away. Upon further investigation, it was found that Interpol wasn't the only agency that Nelson had pretended to be part of. He had taken photos in gear that mirrored that of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, ICE, and Homeland Security, to name a few. The DA settled on impersonating an officer and false imprisonment for his charges. He was bonded out of jail at some point before the formal trial, but was ultimately sentenced to 3 years of probation, along with hefty fines. Today's topic was requested by Tamika Davis, 6641, and Sean Delap, 8587. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Strapping on a new mask. In September of 2015, 27-year-old Gail Newland of Chester, UK, was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in jail for posing as a man to trick a female friend into having relations with her. Newland adopted an online persona called Kyle Fortune and used it to stage a fraudulent relationship with an unnamed fellow student at the University of Chester. As far back as 2011, Newland would arrange meetups with her victim and have the woman blindfolded while they spent time together. Thanks to creative use of the off-the-shelf prosthetics, even when things got intimate, the victim had no clue that her tryst was actually with a woman. When the victim eventually figured out the truth, she immediately went to authorities. Newland's defense team pointed out that she had been diagnosed with not only Asperger's syndrome, which is known to cripple one's social prowess and sense of right and wrong, but also with gender dysphoria, a mental condition that often leads to individuals officially transitioning their own gender. This was not enough to dissuade the jury from passing down the 8-year sentence. She was released on appeal in 2017, with the judge in the case commenting that Newland seemed extremely unlikely to reoffend. If lying can't get bad enough, what happens when you lead a double life? Find out in parts 1 and 2 of when living a double life goes wrong, because we've got both lined up for you next. All you gotta do is stay tuned until after number 1. Number 1. Adulterated Evidence. On March the 10th of 2023, 30-year-old Renee Skoglund of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, was arrested for filing a false police report and wasting department resources in relation to a fabricated sexual assault that happened in Florida. Police in Tampa, Florida, pursued the investigation long after Skoglund had left the state, eventually figuring out that she had made the whole thing up and touching base with police in her new home state. Skoglund's original story was that she had been on an interstate road in the area when she had to pull over with car trouble. It was at this point that an unknown man came upon her, tied her up and proceeded to have his way with her. The story fell apart when it was eventually found that Skoglund had bought the rope used in the crime herself at a nearby Walmart, as was seen on surveillance camera footage. The case became fairly open and shut from there. Skoglund confessed to making the whole thing up and even divulged her reason for doing so. She had cheated on her husband while out of state and made up the allegations to secure a free STD test. And to cover up her indiscretion, she pleaded guilty to all charges and was handed a 2-year community control sentence, along with 8 years of probation. Additionally, she'll also have to pay back roughly $17,000 to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office to offset the cost of the fake investigation that she sparked. In June of 2017, Palm Beach County Sheriff's deputies arrested a man by the name of Emerson Benjoino after he picked up a parcel containing GBL from a UPS mailbox in Wellington. The 38-year-old, a native of Brazil, was a former bodybuilder accused of running a drug-dealing operation with his wife, Nicole. The latter was described as a suburban mom and former special education teacher. Back in 2002, Nicole, who then weighed about 300 pounds, divorced her first husband. The demise of her relationship left her fraught with low self-esteem and a negative body image, prompting her to adopt an intensive dieting and exercise routine. Although she lost nearly half her body weight, Nicole's body image struggles remained. She started seeing Ben Joyno, whom she met at the gym. Nicole allegedly became obsessed with the man who was 10 years younger than her, and the pair would go on to marry in 2009. According to Nicole's legal defense team, she subsequently got sucked into her husband's existing drug conspiracy, which entailed receiving shipments of steroids from Brazil to sell to his bodybuilding and weightlifting associates. Following Ben Joyno's arrest in 2017, law enforcement searched the couple's Wellington residence. They found over $400,000 in cash, guns, a ledger of drug transactions dating back a year, as well as a supply of fentanyl, pain pills, and other illegal substances. Nicole was arrested for aiding her husband's drug business, a facet of her life that she'd long kept secret from those who knew her as a dedicated mother and educator. Though there was no evidence that the woman knew about the guns or opioids in the house, she was directly involved in other crimes, including the sale of Xanax pills and GBL. Nicole ultimately pleaded guilty to possessing illegal drugs with intent to distribute. During sentencing, she asked the judge to consider her entire life book and not just this one unfortunate chapter, though neglected to provide further explanation. In January of 2018, she was sentenced to 2.5 years in federal prison. Her husband, meanwhile, emptied out his bank accounts and fled to Brazil after being released on bond. As of the latest updates, he hadn't yet been found. Number 9. Regina Turner. Prominent New York City spinal surgeon Dr. Han-Jo Kim filed for divorce from beauty queen Regina Turner in December of 2020. The millionaire doctor reportedly discovered explicit messages that his wife had exchanged with another man on a computer in their Upper East Side residence. Turner, who was named Miss Connecticut back in 2011, married Kim in November of 2015. By that time, she'd already had multiple run-ins with the law. In 2008, she was arrested and fined $150 for reckless driving in Connecticut. 6 years later, she was sued for not paying over $10,000 in rent to the landlord of her upscale Soho apartment. A second rent-related lawsuit was filed against Turner in the New York County Civil Court only 4 days before her and Kim's wedding. Then in 2021, the latter filed a bombshell complaint in Manhattan Supreme Court, alleging that Turner had been leading a double life as a high-end escort. Throughout their marriage, financial documents revealed that the woman had processed nearly $700,000 in cash deposits between 2015 and 2021. A large portion of the money she allegedly made as an escort originated from a New Jersey real estate executive. While the pair were dating, Turner allegedly told Kim that she was working on an app that was backed by a wealthy Chinese investor. When he asked how she was supporting herself while the app was in development, the beauty queen said she was living off a $500,000 inheritance from her great-grandmother. The app, as it would ultimately come to light, was a complete fabrication. In Kim's complaint, it was mentioned that Turner would often travel in order to provide intimate favors to clients. She covered up the true reason for her frequent trips by telling him she was out with girlfriends or traveling for work. Kim went on to further expose his wife's lies, revealing that she'd never actually graduated high school, despite claiming to have studied science at the University of Connecticut. The wealthy couple settled their divorce on July the 26th of 2021, preventing any additional information from surfacing in court. Number 8. Britany Simone Smith. In February of 2021, a mother of 2 from Raleigh, North Carolina, named Britany Simone Smith was reported missing. An urgent search for the 28-year-old, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, led to the discovery of a purple suitcase along the shoreline of the Neuse River in Wake County. Inside the luggage, law enforcement found Smith's remains. The woman had reportedly been strangled to death, stuffed into the suitcase and tossed in the river. In the immediate aftermath, police didn't mention a motive for Smith's killing, which had left many of her friends and family puzzled. While speaking with the victim's boyfriend, Cody Page, investigators started to get a sense that she'd gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd. More specifically, Page claimed that Smith had a secret life involving drugs. He told police that the last time he'd seen her before she disappeared, she was about to be picked up by Thomas Johnson, aged 37. The latter, along with 24-year-old Emily Trevethan, were intercepted by law enforcement during a traffic stop in Raleigh on February the 10th. The pair were arrested, though the Wake County Sheriff's Office failed to disclose what led them to the suspects beyond Page's testimony. Johnson and Trevathan were held at the Wake County Detention Center without bond. They each faced charges of murder, murder of an unborn child, and concealment of a body. Number 7. Jeffrey Scott Brake. On August 10th of 2021, the Citrus County Sheriff's Office in Florida took to Facebook to announce that a local middle school teacher had been arrested on severe felony charges. 52-year-old Jeffrey Scott Brake from the city of Dunellen reportedly taught math at Citrus Springs Middle School. On August 9th, the Sheriff's Tactical Impact Unit, along with detectives from the Special Victims Unit, served 2 search warrants at the man's home and adjoining RV. In Brake's pocket, deputies found a glass pipe that tested positive for meth. During the search of the RV, law enforcement came upon 2 eyeglass cases, inside of which they found 3 clear plastic baggies containing meth, heroin, and fentanyl. Investigators also discovered a digital scale, as well as a collection of firearms, prescription pill bottles, and drug paraphernalia. Following the revelation of Brake's secret life as a narcotics dealer, one of his former students claimed that at times he was known to act skittish and hyper, though no one knew of his criminal activity. The man was charged with drug trafficking, having a residence for the trafficking of a controlled substance, and possession with intent to distribute. He was jailed on a $41,000 bond before being released. 3 months later, he was rearrested for stashing illegal video material on his electronic devices. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children tipped Citrus County officials off about Brake's activities, and he was swiftly taken back into custody. The former teacher was hit with an additional 13 counts, facing a prison sentence of up to 75 years if convicted as charged. Number 6. Shavon Pearson. Police in Sanford, Florida, received a call from a motorist claiming that a woman had brandished a gun during a traffic dispute in the early hours of March the 25th of 2023. Officers responded to the scene and initially found nothing, as the female suspect had already left. However, they eventually spotted a car that matched the 911 caller's description of the suspect. The vehicle had no tail lights on, so it was pulled over, and officers immediately noticed a marijuana blunt in plain view. A more extensive search uncovered some white powder, which was later confirmed to be fentanyl. The car contained 8 grams of the highly dangerous substance, more than twice the amount necessary to qualify as trafficking. The driver was identified as 38-year-old Shavon Pearson, a veteran Seminole County educator who'd been teaching 9th graders for 16 years. She was arrested and charged with trafficking fentanyl. In the arrest report, it was noted that Pearson claimed to have been set up by a male associate. Though her accusations weren't given any credence by police, Seminole High School placed the woman on administrative leave pending the results of the case. Law enforcement stated that there was no evidence that Pearson had conducted any of her unlawful business on school grounds. She was released from jail on a $15,000 bond. Number 5. EnroChat criminals. At the height of his power, British drug kingpin Richard Weald boasted that he could make over $35,000 a week selling his product through the encrypted communications network EnroChat. Weald reportedly used his business Gasworks Motor Company as a front for his illegal enterprise. He sent over 20,000 messages on EnroChat under the name Black Label, and in many of them discussed how the platform had allowed him to lead an easy life. In October of 2023, it was reported that the National Crime Agency had cracked down on drug dealers using encrypted messaging after Dutch and French officials successfully took down EnroChat. Among the 3,100 arrested in the UK alone was Weald, as well as fellow drug lord Thomas Mayer. The latter wrote on EnroChat that he'd been at this game the last 20-odd years, boasting that he ran a Europe-wide drug ring from his living room. British law enforcement revealed that many criminal gangs using EnroChat were taking their children to school, then making large amounts of cash illegally in their downtime. Wield was ultimately jailed for 19 years after pleading guilty to conspiracy to supply cocaine, heroin, MDMA, 2CB, and cannabis, as well as transferring criminal property. Meanwhile, Mayer was sentenced to more than 14 years in prison after admitting 2 counts of importing Class A drugs into the UK and 2 counts of money laundering. Number 4. Joanne Marianne Segovia, a well-respected police union official from California, was accused of leading a Breaking Bad-style double life as a fentanyl distributor for years without raising the suspicions of her friends, family, or co-workers. Joanne Marianne Segovia, who was 64 at the time of her arrest in 2023, served as the executive director of the San Jose Police Officers Association for many years. Beginning in October of 2015, she allegedly used her personal and office computers to order thousands of synthetic opioid pills as well as other drugs to her home in a gated San Jose community. Segovia then shipped the contraband to customers throughout the country. The logistics of her global operation were meticulously planned in encrypted WhatsApp communications. Between 2020 and 2023, Segovia exchanged hundreds of messages with someone using a phone with an Indian country code. Her illegal shipments came from various places around the world, including Hong Kong, Hungary, India, and Singapore. The woman was interviewed by authorities in February of 2023. She then continued her criminal activities, even after learning that the FBI was on her tail. On March the 13th, federal agents seized a package in Kentucky that was addressed to Segovia and found that it contained Valoryl fentanyl. She was taken into police custody, much to the surprise of those who knew her. One of her employees stated that when the news broke, it was utter disbelief. The grandmother of 2 had even concealed her drug dealer alter ego from her 79-year-old husband, Domingo. Segovia kept the man in the dark about her double life by labeling drug shipments as wedding party favors or chocolate and sweets. According to a source close to the matter, at least one of Segovia's shipments ended up causing an overdose. She denied the allegations, claiming that the mastermind behind the drug ring was actually her housekeeper. If convicted, Segovia could face up to 20 years in prison as punishment. Number 3. Maria Butina. In August of 2016, Russian national Maria Butina moved to the US on a student visa and enrolled as a graduate student in international relations at American University in Washington, D.C. On multiple occasions during her college tenure, Butina got the police called on her by bragging to other students about her contacts in the Russian government while she was drunk. She also formed a close relationship with Republican political operative Paul Erickson. The pair eventually started dating and even moved in together. A year before Butina's move to the States, she emailed Erickson a description of a proposed project to influence the Republican Party to be friendlier to Russia through the NRA. While she was in the US, the young woman established a cooperative relationship between the NRA and Right to Bear Arms, the Russian gun rights organization she started back in 2011. Butina, along with Russian politician Alexander Torshin, began attending annual NRA meetings in the US and were even invited as special guests in 2014. She also attempted to establish ties to conservative American politicians, often lying about her identity in order to gain access to high-level contacts in Washington. During the presidential race of 2016, Butina attended an event where Donald Trump gave a speech. She asked him a question from the audience, urging for lighter sanctions against Russia and a better relationship between the two often warring nations. In July of 2018, Butina was arrested and charged with acting in the United States as an agent of a foreign government. All along, she'd allegedly been working as a special assistant to Torshin, who was a member of Vladimir Putin's party and deputy governor of the Central Bank of Russia. The conniving young woman had been tasked with infiltrating the Republican Party as part of an effort to promote Russian interests in the 2016 election. According to the Senate Intelligence Committee, Butina had unsuccessfully tried to convince the Trump campaign to establish a secret communications back channel with Russia. She ultimately served around 5 months at Tallahassee Federal Correctional Institution before being deported back to Russia in October of 2019. Though Butina publicly denied acting as a spy, she was elected to the State Duma as a member of Putin's United Russia Party in 2021. Number 2. Donald Santini. The lifeless body of 33-year-old Cynthia Ruth Wood was discovered in a ditch in Hillsborough County, Florida on June the 9th of 1984, just days after she'd been reported missing. The last person that was seen leaving Wool's house prior to her disappearance was Donald Santini. The man's fingerprints were reportedly found on the victim's body, cementing his status as law enforcement's prime suspect. Santini had previously spent time behind bars for allegedly assaulting someone while stationed in Germany during a stint with the military in 1978. A year before Wood went missing, he was also accused of taking part in an armed robbery in Texas. However, after being named a suspect in Wood's murder, Santini went on the run, paving the way for a now infamous manhunt that unfolded over the course of multiple decades. He used over a dozen aliases, bouncing around from one location to another during his nearly 40 years as a fugitive. On multiple occasions, the case was featured on America's Most Wanted. While living under the name Wellman Simmons, Santini served as president of the Water Authority in Campo, California, a tight-knit rural community just outside San Diego. The man routinely appeared at public events and even drew considerable praise from the community for his work with the Water Authority. Investigators pursued many leads which took them far and wide, from Texas to Thailand. For years the case went cold, but advancements in investigative technology eventually gave police the break that they needed. The U.S. Marshals Service reportedly received a tip as to Santini's whereabouts from the Florida Caribbean Regional Fugitive Task Force. Although the agency declined to expound on the developments that resolved the cold case, Santini was arrested in Campo on June the 7th of 2023. He claimed responsibility for Wood's killing and was extradited back to Florida. Leading up to the murder, Santini had befriended the victim, who was going through a contentious divorce, by promising to find dirt on her estranged husband. Following his arrest, it emerged that he used different aliases to file for bankruptcy several times while he was on the run. He owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to dozens of people and companies, including the San Diego Union Tribune. Santini was deemed a serious flight risk and denied bail during a preliminary court hearing. Number 1. James Addy. 35-year-old Molly Watson was found with a gunshot wound to the back of her head during the late evening hours of April the 27th of 2018. A man had come upon her car, pulled over to the side of a dark gravel road surrounded by woods in Monroe County, Missouri. He noticed the woman lying on the ground next to the vehicle and immediately dialed 911. The dispatcher advised him to check for a pulse, confirming his suspicion that she was already dead. Investigators discovered a marriage license with Watson and her fiancé's names on it inside the car. The victim was set to marry 51-year-old James Addy just 2 days after her body was found. The pair had met at the Moberly Area Correctional Center, where Addy worked as a corrections officer. They dated for 7 years before getting engaged, with Watson's brother stating that she was completely in love. However, as the police investigation progressed, it became clear that Addy wasn't at all who he seemed to be. By the time the man had started dating Watson, he'd already been married to another woman for over a decade. Rather than pursuing a divorce from his wife Melanie, Addy carried on his extramarital relationship with Watson while keeping the two halves of his life completely separate from one another. Then, according to the police, he murdered his mistress in cold blood mere days before their wedding. Addy denied the allegations but was nevertheless taken into custody on murder charges. 2 weeks later, Melanie filed for divorce. Forensic investigators discovered that the day before Watson had been killed, she looked for Melanie Addy's obituary on the internet. Prosecutors argued that the victim's search history indicated it was likely that she'd found out about Addy's marriage, but that he'd claimed his wife was dead. In April of 2021, Addy was found guilty of first-degree murder and criminal use of a firearm. That July, he was sentenced to life without parole. Number 8. Olivia Smith. On November the 14th of 2015, Olivia Smith aged 18, killed her younger step-cousin, Abby Hebert, and later insisted that God made her do it. The girls had reportedly been good friends and used to do numerous activities together. Smith had slept over at Hebert's house in Georgia the night before, but an argument broke out between them the following morning after they'd reportedly smoked an illegal substance. The dispute began in the kitchen and turned physical, culminating with Smith grabbing a kitchen knife and stabbing Hebert. The wounded teen tried to run out of the house, but Smith caught up with her when she reached the front lawn, got on top of her, and stabbed her several more times. Neighbors called the police, who arrested Smith at the scene. Her family and attorneys insisted that a bad reaction to the substance had led to her murderous outburst and that Smith would have never committed such an act had she not been under the influence. Several psychiatric evaluations concluded that Smith was mentally sound and that the reaction to the substance had likely been the cause of the attack. The teen took a plea deal and her original felony murder charge was changed to voluntary manslaughter. In May of 2018, she was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Number 7. Brianna Zerth. Brianna Zerth, a 29-year-old Arizona woman, was drinking with her cousin, Peter McKenna Jr., aged 33, when an argument broke out that led to her attacking him with a hammer. On May the 4th of 2022, local police received a call after a fight was heard at Zerth's residence. Upon their arrival, officers found McKenna deceased as a result of blunt force trauma. Zerth told the police that she and McKenna had gotten into an argument about the woman's 6-year-old daughter, who was present during the violence that followed. Zerth claimed that the details of the bludgeoning were blurry. According to the police report, McKenna also suffered several puncture wounds on his back from the claw of the hammer. Zerth was arrested at the scene and charged with second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and aggravated assault. She was released from jail not long after her arrest, when the attorney's office requested more information on the case from the police department. In the examination report, Zerth claimed that McKenna had choked her and that she'd acted in self-defense. However, the police department reportedly planned to resubmit the original charges. Number 6. Ricky Hawk. 23-year-old rapper Ricky Hawk, also known as Silento, was arrested for killing his 34-year-old cousin Frederick Rooks on January the 21st of 2021. Hawk, well known for his 2015 hit single Watch Me, Whip, Nene, fatally shot Rooks several times in the face and leg in the middle of a Georgia street before fleeing the scene. Police received the call about the shooting and found Rooks dead upon their arrival. Nearby surveillance video helped identify the suspect as Hawk, who was later arrested and charged with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. While a motive for the murder wasn't immediately disclosed, Hawk made a statement explaining that he'd always had mental health problems due to his upbringing, and encouraged anyone who faced a similar struggle to seek professional help. Number 5. Jeremy Leister and Jacob Locke. While talking over a jail's monitored in-house phone system, Florida cousins Jeremy Leister and Jacob Locke, both in their 20s, planned to rob an elderly man in his Iowa home. Locke had been arrested on July the 11th of 2021 for an unrelated incident that involved stealing a vehicle, evading a traffic stop, and running over an officer's leg as he fled. He was arrested and had been in jail ever since the incident, but nevertheless plotted further criminal activity. Several phone calls between the 11th and 24th of July had been recorded between Locke and Leister as they communicated through the jail's phone. They were orchestrating a home invasion against an Iowa man that Locke had met during a work release program when he was an inmate at the Iowa Department of Corrections. 6 law enforcement agencies worked together to investigate the phone calls and ultimately obtained a search warrant for Leister's home on July the 31st. Leister and an unidentified man were taken into custody during the raid after police discovered the phone used to make the phone calls to Locke and over 10 grams of an unspecified illegal substance. Both cousins were charged with conspiracy to commit home invasion robbery, and Leister received an additional charge of unlawful possession of an illegal substance with intent to sell. Number 4. Ray Oliver and Corinthian Thompson. In 2021, cousins Ray Oliver and Corinthian Thompson, both 35, were linked to the murder of 21-year-old Addison Mudd. She was found dead in her mobile home in Florida with a gunshot wound on March the 28th. A police investigation revealed that Mudd was the victim of a deadly robbery carried out by Oliver and Thompson, but it was unclear whether she was specifically targeted or selected at random. Oliver had been arrested on the 1st of April on unrelated drug charges and was already serving 26 months in prison when police connected him to the murder. In addition to his existing sentence, he faced armed robbery and first-degree murder charges. 6 months later, on October the 1st, the police tracked down Thompson and arrested him on the same charges as his cousins. Number 3. Richard and Jasmine Doxtator. 70-year-old Giuseppe Joe Caputo was found dead in his Niagara Falls home on June the 19th of 2015 with 18 knife injuries on his body. A stab wound to his chest had been inflicted with such force that it split the bone in 2 pieces, causing his death. An investigation found that Caputo was 38-year-old Jasmine Doxtator's former friend and drug dealer. She, along with her cousin Richard, were arrested after evidence was found linking them to the crime scene. During her trial, Jasmine testified that Caputo had drugged and assaulted her during their latest meeting. After telling her cousin about what had happened, the pair planned to confront Caputo. As part of their plan, Jasmine had called the man asking to meet up at a fast food restaurant near his home. The cousins arrived before he did, giving Jasmine a chance to get out of the car and wait for him as Richard watched on from a distance. Caputo and Jasmine rode together in the former's car back to his home while Richard followed them. Upon arriving at the victim's residence, there were conflicting stories as to how the male Doxtator had gained access. The cousins insisted that Caputo himself had opened the door when Richard knocked and invited him in, while prosecutors argued that there was evidence to suggest that he waited on the patio for Jasmine to unlock the door for him. Richard claimed that an altercation then occurred between him and Caputo when the homeowner reached for a kitchen knife that he had to wrestle away from him. Richard maintained that he'd stabbed Caputo in self-defense. The cousin fled the scene shortly thereafter, and while they claimed not to have taken anything from Caputo's home, the man's identification card, insurance cards, vehicle ownership card, and cell phone were found in various locations on the roads of the Niagara region. In 2017, both cousins were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. However, in February of 2022, it was announced that they'd get a retrial due to a failure in the structure of their trial judge's instructions to the jury in 2017. Number 2. Denise Escobido. Denise Escobido, a 31-year-old deputy constable from Dallas, was arrested following the unlawful hiring of her cousin as a peace officer and the failure to report a shooting. Escobido and 2 other officers were hired to work as security for a private party in September of 2019. When one of the officers was unable to make it last minute, Escobido gave her cousin Ramiro Vielma the job, despite the fact that he wasn't a peace officer. In the early hours of September the 1st, Escobido and Vielma were posted at the party entrance gate when the former stopped a truck carrying 4 people. The man behind the wheel, identified as Marco Faz, cooperated with Escobido when she asked for his license to check his age, in spite of him being over 21 years old. The officer confiscated a case of beer from the truck before instructing Faz to leave. He protested and insisted to see Escobido's badge, but she refused and threatened to write him a ticket if he didn't leave, so he decided to go. After Faz made a U-turn, Escobido and Vielma tried to stop the vehicle again. The driver later recounted how he'd become concerned the duo weren't really members of law enforcement and opted to drive past them. That's when they took out their guns and shot at Faz's truck multiple times. One bullet hit the man in the right earlobe, another struck one of his passengers in the hand, and a third bullet hit a passenger in the shoulder. Faz rushed to the hospital where everyone was treated for their injuries, and they later reported the incident to the police. Investigators noted inconsistencies in Escobido's story, and she was arrested on a felony charge of impersonating a public servant, misdemeanor counts of official oppression, and failure to report a felony resulting in serious bodily injury. Vielma was charged with impersonating a public servant, but like his cousin, was ultimately released after posting bond. Number 1. Roshane Barnett. On July the 20th of 2022, Jamaican man Roshane Barnett brutally murdered his 34-year-old cousin, Kamisha Wright, and her 4 children after he felt that she disrespected him. The woman ran a business out of her home that 31-year-old Barnett occasionally helped at, but he'd reportedly become enraged by her attitude towards him in the days leading up to the murders. It allegedly involved her telling him to not serve a particular customer again, snatching money from his hands, and splashing water in his face. On the night of July the 20th, he attacked Wright with a knife and stabbed her before cutting her throat and targeting the rest of her family. The following day, another relative discovered their bodies and called the police. Barnett was arrested following an investigation, and sentencing was scheduled for September the 22nd of 2022. Despite the fact that the death penalty hadn't been applied in Jamaica for 30 years, prosecutors were seeking it for Barnett due to the brutal nature of his crimes. If the man was to receive capital punishment, his sentence could still possibly be reduced to life in prison if he spent over 5 years on death row. Thanks for watching. Would you lose the ability to lie or lose your sense of smell? Let us know in the comments section below.